meeting for today for the House Election Law Committee. We'll start off with the per usual of the pledge. Representative Brennan, would you like to lead us in the pledge? Okay, excellent. I hope everybody had a great weekend for all the religious holidays that were going on. A couple things before we start up on SB 156. There has been a subcommittee formed to study campaign finance. Representative Query is the scheduling member or the de facto chairman of that committee. The committee membership includes Representatives Ward, Representatives Muirhead, Representatives Lane, myself, Representative Prudhomme O'Brien. So Representative Quayle is in charge of scheduling that. It was noticed, I think, I want to say 2 weeks ago, but at least now it's on the public record. All right, and with that, we will open up the public hearing on a Senate bill. Woo, there's one. Senate Bill 156. Senator Gray, it's good to see you.
Thank you very much. I am James Gray. I represent Senate District 6, which starts up on Route 11 in Alton, Gilmanton, comes down towards Rochester, and all the little towns that pretty much butt up against that. Senate Bill 156 does a couple of things. Certainly, there was a different procedure that we had for people who registered within 30 days. That would sound unconstitutional. So most of the stuff that you see in the bill is stuff that takes out the things that we couldn't do anymore. The other things, and I'm going to paraphrase them kind of briefly because I am going to try to make most of my finance hearings today, but be back with you when I need to be for introduction of bills. We're trying to make it easier for people in the state, both the Attorney General's office, et cetera, to check on people who come in without a identity, without anything that proves, no driver's license, no whatever. And right now the procedure is that they're supposed to get investigated, and we do. We investigate them to the best of our ability. But there are things that when I met with Dick Tracy, who is the investigator for the Attorney General's office, things that we can do that help him out, okay? If we add a voluntary section in the registration form when they come in with no ID, if they've got a social media account and that social media account has been around for 4 years, I'm pretty sure that I can find them, okay? And that's big criteria for Mr. Tracy. If they give me a social media account other than that, if they give me a telephone number, if they give me all of these things, help the Attorney General's office in doing the investigations and narrowing this down to people who may be the problem that we're looking for, and not just people who have a reason not to be able to provide an ID. So again, those are the things we allow in here. Right now, if you are a moderator or the clerk, you can, and you know the person that's coming in, you can certify for them. If a voter comes in with someone who is already on the checklist before the beginning of the day, and has somebody that they'll be able to verify for at least 2 of those people. Again, what we're trying to do is to cut down on the people that we are investigating, such that we're concentrating on the ones that really matter. So there's other things in there I'm sure you'll have questions on. If you don't ask them now, you can, I think you know my phone number, so, an email address. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so questions from the committee. Representative Hamlet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. So on page 7, under Roman numeral 5, it lists some of the things, some of the additional information that can be used, such as phone numbers, email addresses, employer information, vehicle license plate number, state of registration, social media account. So I didn't realize the Secretary of State didn't have access to these things now. So what is the,
State law is very particular on when it allows us to use databases from other departments.
okay,
And if you go into the statute, right now, we can share information about a voter and someone who has a driver's license for the purposes of finding people to be on juries. And there is limited amount of other information that you can share. Last year, we had a bill that would allow them to share the last 4 digits of the Social Security number, but the House didn't like that as much as the Senate did, and we'll probably run that by you again soon, but not today. So,
okay, thank you. Thank you.
Further questions from the committee? Representative Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. How does a voter voluntarily allow this information to be collected by the Secretary of State? Is that something that's on the registration form or affidavit form that indicates that they can voluntarily?
they're going to modify the form to have a block that allows them to collect it.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions from the committee? Representative Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. Do you know how many people show up on election day typically without an ID?
If it's a town election or municipal election, it's very, very few. Right now, we had a special election for a state representative in Rochester after the start of the new procedure for affidavit voting, and there was no one who showed up to register that day in Rochester. The Secretary of State could probably tell you how many for the town meetings that have already been held, how many, fell under the new procedure. It's not many. In my time for being on election law, we do take the pictures, and I have never heard of anyone that came in and complained that they had duplicate pictures of an individual in 2 different towns that registered on the same day. So that's a good thing too. So again, what we're trying to do is, if we're going to spend the money to investigate the people, we want to do it as efficiently as we can and help the inspector out gathering this type of information. Certainly, in the inspector's mind, it may be that if you don't provide any of that information, it may be somebody that he wants to start with and not finish with when he's doing the investigation. But that'll be up to him.
Further questions? Representative Wood, follow up?
Follow up, please. Thank you. It sounds, after reading this is going to be voluntary, correct? If this passes, will the Secretary of State have the option, I mean, he has a name, to run that name across databases to make our job easier? Is he going to be able to do that if this passes, or does he need them to basically give up that right or whatever?
If you look at the state law right now, the Secretary of State doesn't do any of the investigations. That's all passed to the Attorney General's office because he really doesn't have any authority in doing any of that I know of. If he wants to correct me, then somebody from the office can.
Further questions? All right. Well, seeing none, Senator Gray, I believe we'll see you back at 1:30,
Yes,
maybe.
sir.
I do not have anyone else signed up or the pink cards. Ms. Tantarelli, you want to come on up, but fill me out a pink card when you get. Oh, you have one in your hand. Perfect. Mr. You can do it after your testimony. It's all right, Ms. Tantarelli. We can just make sure you get it to me. It's a homework assignment.
I always do my homework. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Liz Tantarelli. I'm president of the League of Women Voters of New Hampshire. And I didn't prepare written testimony on this because my testimony is very simple. It's time to clear up some of the language of our voting laws, and it's that part of the bill in particular that I want to address. Some of this language is a remainder from SB 3, which was declared unconstitutional in July of 2021. And it's time to get that language out of there because all it does is confuse people. So I'm just speaking in support of it from that point of view, and I will fill out my card.
Okay. Will you be taking questions, or are you all set?
Certainly, if there are any.
All right. Are there any questions from the committee? Representative Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. Are you comfortable that they took out what you needed in here?
I think so.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
That was a hardball. Any other questions from the committee? All right. That being said, now I definitely don't have any more pink cards. Representative Wood, can you grab me the sign-in sheet for this, so we can close this committee and hang out for 15 minutes? Because apparently I can't. I underestimated people's interest in SB 156. Okay. Thank you. Well, we had no one signed in that didn't speak, so the blue sheet is empty. With that, I'm going to close the public hearing on SB 156. The committee will stand in recess until 1:30 when we will hear SB 157. I'm going to grab my Republican colleagues for a quick caucus over here in the office, and if the honorary Vice Chairman Muirhead wants to join it, it's fine. Okay, it's 1:30. I'm going to reconvene the House Election Law public hearing, and I'm going to open the committee hearing on SB 157. I recognize Senator Gray to introduce his bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is James Gray. I represent Senate District 6, which starts in Alton and Gilmanton, comes down Route 11 to Rochester. SB 157 needs to pass to continue the audits that we are doing right now. When I was back in the House, there was the Election Integrity Commission or whatever it is down in Washington had two big gripes about New Hampshire. They said that we didn't have audits and we weren't using machines that they had certified. Well, we haven't changed the machines that we used, and they didn't go back and certify anything that it was already out there. So it was impossible for us to have a certified machine. And this vision here was, how can we audit the machines that we have? We don't have pictures of the ballots. We can't distinguish the count in the machine, one ballot for another one, because of the ways the machines do it. And so we came up with a procedure where we use a high-speed scanner, run all the ballots through there, compare the counts from the election night with those counts. Then we actually do a sample of the ballots because the machine takes a picture of the top and the bottom and records that against the number that it assigns, so that we can pull a ballot up and then look at what the actual picture shows us and what was recorded in the vote. It has worked well, in my opinion. You've got the audit reports that you can go look at. One of the things that the Secretary of State's office just asked me about was, how about taking out the words AccuVote, okay? Well, this procedure was written just for the AccuVote machines. If you take and certify some of these newer machines and the machine already scans the ballots and assigns a serial number to them, you may want to start in a different place. The other thing they wanted me to make sure that I clarified is that we're not looking at doing more than one machine in a locality, okay? That we're doing just a very few machines, and if you do multiple machines in one town, then you're not going to be as effective as you can be in this random audit that we're doing by selecting the towns. So that the Secretary of State's office, if they want, word changed here or there to make sure that it's clear that we're not trying to do multiple machines in a town, that's fine with me. But remember that my vision, and hopefully your vision, is that as new machines are certified, that a plan to audit those machines will be developed and implemented at the same time. And I do not anticipate that be the same thing that we're doing with the AccuVote machines, because I needed a starting point. I needed a place to start, and that was the high-speed scanner taking the picture of both sides of the ballot and assigning it a serial number so that that can happen. The only reason that we do two machines in the primary is so that when we get to the general election, the Secretary of State can't come to me and say, oh, gee, we don't have the equipment to do it any longer. We got rid of those a while ago, or any other reason. So we work out our problems in the primary. We're not really trying to audit the primary. We're trying to make sure that they've practiced the procedure that they're going to use on election day, or I should say right after the election, to audit the machines. Be happy to answer any question you have.
Questions from the committee? Representative Burnham.
Thank you,
Burnham.
Chairman. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Gray, for taking my question. I just was looking at the fiscal schedule, and I was just wondering why 2025 is an increase.
I haven't looked at the fiscal note in a while. I don't. I know that in a lot of the election law bills that came out, and should certainly check with the Secretary's office, that they did not include in the fiscal notes the added people that they would need to do these various things. So, you know, as my other hat in chair of Senate Finance, I told them to make sure that when they come in and do their budget presentation in front of us, that they tell me about all those little things that I've done in all these election law bills, that they haven't asked for a person and, you know, added together. You know, they probably do need a little bit more of assistance or a little bit more in their budget. But again, I direct you to there, since they would have been the ones that filled out the
Okay.
audit, the FN.
Follow up?
A follow-up?
It's actually an additional question, if you don't mind. So when conducting the audits, just to clarify, are the audits going to be on all machines in that one polling location, or you're just picking and choosing which one in that location and then randomly going to another town or city?
If we are going to do 4 to 6 machines in the time limit that were provided, what we want is that the Secretary of State will get there around noontime, before any of the ballots are taken out of the machines. Make sure that any ballots that went through a particular machine are segregated, so that the tape for those ballots will match the tape running them through the high-speed machine. I hope that answers your question.
It does, thank you.
Vice Chairman Bohm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All of this says about auditing AccuVote ballots and AccuVote machines.
Yep.
Shouldn't it be something about saying, reading Secretary of State approved the machines? I mean, we're stuck with this, and then it's gonna have to be changed sometime in the future.
Absolutely. Again, the things that I've talked about in the Senate is that as they approve a new machine, okay, be it whatever manufacturing, is that they should approve an audit plan for that machine, because there can be subtle differences in one machine versus another that will change the way you want to conduct the audit. In the case of the AccuVote machines, I don't have a starting point of a scanned ballot that I can identify to a particular portion of the database. So I needed to do that scanning to begin with. I don't envision that happening on a newer machine.
Follow-up?
Follow-up. Also, number of machines, and I've been doing this a lot a long time. The problem is one machine out of 2 or 3 or 4. Sometimes what happens is one of the machines goes down, and they take all those ballots and stick them in another machine just to get a completely accurate account. So
Yep.
couldn't that be a problem?
That's certainly, you know, anything can be a problem, okay? What we've done in the past is that if a machine goes down, there's a decision made whether or not we need to rescan all of the ballots that went through
Right.
that machine, or to take a different machine, put it in place, use the tape from the first machine, and then make a tape for the second machine. Again, the
Right.
Secretary of State, you know, is going to have to do this on the fly, and make the right decision for the state.
All right, thank you.
Representative Muirhead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess in the ideal, I'd love to see an audit regimen that would apply to the machines the state's using now and any machines that the state might use in the future without having without having to write new laws to accommodate future machines. So one question is, do you think it is possible to write a law describing an audit regimen that would apply to any and all machines that are in use and might be in use in the foreseeable future? And related to that, would you be friendly to an amendment that would expand the audit regime to include, wards or localities that are hand counted?
There is already a procedure for hand count towns. In fact, it is all of the ballots, no matter what. If there is a race that is a state representative race requires a recount, then up to 10 of those towns are hand counted, and that is regardless of whether they're using the AccuVote machines or, hand counting them. So that is part of what we do already. Would I put into law or think it was a friendly amendment, putting a procedure that would go forever? I don't think that the procedure for auditing new machines should be in law at all. I think it should be part of the approval process from the Ballot Law Commission, and it should be specified, there. If you disagree with me, then, you're free to do what you want. But I believe that audit, because I don't know the intricacies of the machine, that it is very difficult to do that. And if I have the Ballot Law Commission already looking at that and saying, well, this would be a good way to audit it, I'm willing to accept that.
Further questions from the committee? Representative Brennan, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. If election audits are important for election integrity and building voter confidence in our elections, does a temporary bill like this, temporary legislation, fulfill that need to increase voter confidence and election integrity through an audit process? And is it fiscally responsible to have such a temporary fix, to be putting in additional software and scanning capabilities for this very limited time, since we are very hopeful that we'll have new machines for 2024?
And we'll speak to the temporariness of this right now, is that in this bill, when it was originally written, I had a lot more audits being done than are done right now, or in the bill right now. My preference would be that there would be 2 machines running 4 audits a day for the 2 days, and so that there would be a total of like 16 machines. But that would have had the Secretary of State go out and buy another scanner, another computer system, another whatever. Remembering that the contract that we have with LHS about the machines being serviceable for elections pretty much runs out with the next state election. That there is no guarantee, and that is why we've tested several machines here during this the spring session with the town meetings. We tested a few last year, all of that. And again, yes, it is going to be temporary because the AccuVote machines are not going to be in use after this. And, or I should say, more than likely won't be in use. But again, we have to certify a new machine or we have to do hand counts. If we're doing hand counts, then I'll go back to the testimony about if there's a state rep race that's being recounted, that current law right now says that we will hand count at least 10 races, higher level races, from those ballots. So we are miles ahead of where we used to be when I was sitting in the same seats that you're sitting now 10 years ago. So we're getting there, and we just need to keep working at it.
Representative Weary?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Gray, for taking my question. Just a clarification, on page 2, it talks about the audit team shall scan all the ballots which were cast. So I'm assuming that's in one machine, all the ballots that were cast in that individual machine.
Correct.
And then you could ostensibly compare that with the results from that machine to show the validate that scan image was consistent between when the voter first submitted and then this recheck. Then down in section 7 on line 10, you then say a random sample of not less than 4% of the ballot scanned shall be selected, and then images shall be compared with the voter choices. That's intended to be a hand count at that point?
Well,
of that 4% sampling?
So let me go back to the beginning, okay?
Okay.
You notice that in there, there is nothing in there that says, this is good and this is bad, okay? And the reason that we do it that way is so that the information will be available to the individual candidates in time for them to request a recount. So if they believe that 1 or 2 vote difference that you see between tape 1 and tape 2 is enough that they want a recount, then they'll go request a recount in accordance with statute the way it is. Okay. So now, one of the big things that people said was you can't use a machine to check a machine. Okay. There's some mathematicians that would argue with you because they were ready to provide me with all kinds of stuff. But so how do you check that second machine? Well, if I had that machine to start with that already scanned the ballots and assigned a serial number, that I could pull up the ballot and the way the ballot was counted, that is how in the state of Vermont and a few of the other states, that's how they do their audits, is they look at that scanned image and they look at what was recorded in their database and say, yep, that was read the way it was supposed to. The capability that we have in the machines that we are using for this audit can actually go in and tell you, how much of the oval was filled in, and allow you to pick if you wanted to. We're not getting into all of that right now. If we want to look at that when we look at a new machine, God love you, have a good time. But again, what we're trying to do is the AccuVote machines and have the voters be able to say, yep, that machine was operating properly on election day.
Follow up?
Yes, thank you. Then you'd leave it up to the Secretary of State's office or to clarify the guidelines for implementation of Section 7.
If there is confusion in their mind about whether we're talking about one machine in a polling place or more, remember that if the moderator has, or if the control of the ballots has been lost by the time they get there at noontime or whatever, and it's a place that uses 2 or more machines, you may be in a condition where you have to do all of the ballots at that polling place to regain control, okay? But that is not the intent. The intent is to control those ballots, make sure that I only am worried about, the ballots that went through a particular machine at that voting location, and then comparing that tape with another one. Again, if I always, when I took statistics in college, I called it sadistics, but you can call it what you want. But that, the percentages that we're using are supposed to give us a confidence factor. And it's not as high as I would like it because I would have done more, but I think it's sufficient to prove our point.
I enjoy statistics. Representative Weary, follow up.
Yeah. When my
Are
grandfather.
you an N or an N+1 guy?
I'm an N+1.
Sample?
So,
N+1 is a sample instead of N with a total population.
when my grandfather taught statistics, they called it the mystery hour. So
Okay.
Just follow up to that Section 7. How was the 4% arrived at? Was there any?
It was a wild guess, picked from a dark place,
Statistician's brain, possibly. So.
and we did look at, N+1, standard deviations, how many, and all of that. But when it went through the committee the last time, 2 years ago, it was easier to say, we're going to pick X number of machines, and they understood it much better that way.
Further questions? And I'm sure we'll enjoy some statistics conversations later. Thank you, Senator Gray. We'll see you back here in, 10 minutes. Probably not. You may be able to spend a little time in the hallway. Next up is going to be Michael O'Brien from Auburn, representing America Votes and the Brennan Center. And Mr. O'Brien, when you get up here, you got to tell us if you support or oppose or nothing the bill. Support it. All right, we'll write that on your pink card. Support-ish.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Michael O'Brien. I am a lobbyist at Party Strategies here representing America Votes and reading testimony on behalf of Lisa Danitz from the Brennan Center. I'm passing the testimony around, so I won't read it verbatim. And there are people behind me who may be able to better answer some questions, but I'll do my best to try. We want to thank Senator Gray for bringing this bill forward, but as some questions have indicated, I think we're looking for a sort of longer term solution to the audits that we think can be used both for AccuVotes and other machines. So just a few of the points from Lisa, who could not be here today because I think she's in a place that's warmer and sunnier, even though it's pretty nice out today. But Italy, so also maybe better food. I don't really know what's going on. But first and most importantly, she recommends this bill should require a manual review of some ballots to check that the ballots were counted accurately. So the point here is that through the scanner, to explain this recommendation, let me backtrack for a moment and describe how the proposed audit works. In step 1, paper ballots from selected towns and city wards are scanned into the audit device and recounted. The totals from the audit device is compared with the totals counted during the election to make sure they match. So that's obviously the first step. Step 2 of the audit is then the process that ensures the audit device itself works properly and has not been comprised in any way. In step 2, there should be a comparison of a random sample of audited paper ballots with the ballot interpretations for those recorded by the audit device. Because voters' ballots provide the most trustworthy record of voters' intentions, New Hampshire's audit process should incorporate use of that authoritative device. So you want to look at not just a scanned ballot, but then a subsample of actual ballots to make sure it's then matching the device that is scanning them. Second, and also quite importantly, New Hampshire audits should not be limited to ballots counted by AccuVote devices, as was just discussed. Instead, all of the state's ballots should be within the audit scope to assure broad representation of New Hampshire voters. This assures that voters that the audit procedure hasn't been favored or cherry-picked some places or machines while avoiding others. By making explicit reference to an audit of the AccuVote electronic ballot counting devices, SB 157 excludes the audit scope jurisdictions that could use hand count and also those that replace their AccuVote machines, again, hopefully sooner than later. Third, we recommend modifications related to the selection of towns and city wards subject to the audit. There should be an increase in the number of towns and city wards selected to be part of the audit, since a greater number of batches in an audit improves the accuracy of the audit. Since we recommend a comparison of smaller number of paper ballots, so they're recommending that you compare 100 paper ballots as opposed to the 4%, it should not increase the workload tremendously to then add in some more wards or towns to choose from. Fourth, we recommend expanding the legislation to cover presidential primaries. It doesn't currently do that. And if folks have concern over the accuracy of elections, it feels like the presidential primary would be a good place for folks to go. So let's make sure that's covered as well to make sure folks feel confident in all of our elections. And fifth and finally, we recommend including within the bill language regarding a process to follow if an audit uncovers differences in the count, which this bill currently does not do. So those are the recommendations from Lisa Danitz, who, a member from this committee, is much smarter than I, but I will do my best to try to answer any questions or leave it to the people smarter behind me to do that as well.
Okay, questions from the committee? You're getting off easy. Oh, no, Representative Britton, do you have a question?
Just a quick one. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. It's my understanding that the new ballot counting machines that are being considered have the scanning capabilities already built in and would be able to easily provide scanned images for an audit. In the testimony that is provided here from Lisa Danitz, would it also be her testimony and your testimony that if the committee were to reword this, make an amendment to this bill, that we make sure we're really capturing the needs for the future and not just the temporary with the AccuVote?
Yeah, so I think that's right. I think the recommendations here from the Brennan Center and from Lisa are recommendations that have been best practices from other states that do audits, and most other states at this point do audit. And so regardless of almost no one else using the AccuVote machine, right? So it's not like this wouldn't apply to some of the newer machines that exist. I won't speak to what the new technologies of the machines can do, especially because the state hasn't actually chosen one yet. And so we're still in the process, and I bet different things do different ones. But I think it's safe to say the recommendations that she brought forward here apply writ large to any machine that the state might choose.
Okay, now further questions. All right, now you get off easy. Next up is Deputy Secretary of State Aaron Hennessy from Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am here representing the Secretary of State, and I wanted to let you know that we do support this bill. The audits that we did in 2022 were very effective. And to Senator Gray's point, you can go on our website and read those reports that we've done. Initially, Senator Gray had more devices that were to be audited and at a higher percentage. And we had asked him to reduce that to, someone had asked where did the numbers come from? We had asked them to reduce that number on the Senate side because of timing. We do the audits after the election, but before the deadline to request a recount, so that if the audit turns up anything where a candidate would question something, they have the option of using that information in their decision process. We are also, as you know, looking at different ballot counting devices, and we do an audit of those devices, every ballot that's gone through those devices after they've been used. So somebody can also have the option to request a recount if information comes out of that. So there's a fine timeline of when after an election and before the recount deadline for us to actually get audits done. And the other thing, to someone else's point, had asked about the fiscal note. So this bill had already been in effect but sunsetted, and for that bill we purchased a high-speed scanner in order to perform that audit. We still have that scanner, which is great, but there is an annual maintenance cost for that scanner of $37,000, whether you use it or not. And then there is a ballot programming fee of approximately $2,000 per ballot. So that's why you see a different cost in odd years versus even years on the fiscal note. Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, do you have a question?
No, I'm sorry. I'm just
Okay.
appalled by those numbers. I should have poker faced a little better.
To the senator's point of the number of devices that we're counting per town or city ward. When we had reviewed this for our 2022 elections and the post-election audits that we did, we reviewed this with the AG's office. And although we knew it was Senator Gray's intent to just count one device, the wording wasn't clear to us that we could only just count one device in a polling location. So just to make it absolutely clear about what the intent is, we would like to add some language to line 26 that says, and not more than one device from a town or city ward. And also to the sponsor's point, when we arrive at noon, if something were to happen to that device that we had randomly selected to audit, or if the ballots had been commingled into a box, if say that machine had gotten full and another machine had gotten full and they commingled those ballots, we would then do the audit on any of the commingled devices. So we would expand that out to whatever devices had been commingled together. The point, I believe, of the 12 p.m. on election day is just to not give anybody a heads up that they're going to be audited. Let's see. I think that is all that I have for you today. I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, questions? Yes, Representative Weary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Deputy Hennessy. So for if you find a problem, what's the Secretary of State's, would you expand the audit if there was a problem found? So, traditionally, if an audit is performed and a sample is taken and you find issues, generally audits are expanded. Has there been any thought along those lines?
Thank you for the question. So if you're saying if with one device we find an issue, would we expand our sample size? Is that your
Yes.
question? We have not encountered that. A lot of the locations only have one device, so would we expand our sample size beyond a town that we're counting? Or is your question more towards if, say, a large polling location that has multiple devices?
So I think it can actually be twofold in that if you find that there is a problem in a particular ward or town with multiple devices, is there a systemic problem in that locale, or conversely, is there a systemic problem in a broader range for similar devices that are throughout the state? So I think it's really to both questions, because the handling locally can be different. That may have led to those issues, or the handling, or if there are broader kind of larger regional statewide issues, that may be a more systemic issue from LHS or whomever, or, whatever system is handling that.
So thank you. I think that's, to your line of questioning, I think that's one of the reasons why we do the audits, is just to show the public that they can have confidence in their elections. If we were to encounter an issue that we could not easily explain, like the moderator comes to us and say, oh, you know what, I think I did, before you got there, commingle ballots or something along those lines. If we cannot come up with an answer, then we would get the Attorney General's office involved and have to figure it out from there.
We love it when the AG's office gets involved. Representative Brandon, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. Going back to the fiscal note and the cost of conducting the audits using the specific software that is the $37,000 per year for the high-speed scanner software. With the new ballot counting machines that this Secretary of State's office and Ballot Law Commission are considering, it's my understanding that they have high-speed scanners within them and appropriate software for scanning. Would approving those devices and getting those devices online ASAP reduce the fiscal impact of the audit as we see here in this bill? Or is there would we be paying an additional cost for high-speed scanning audits regardless?
Thank you for the question, Representative. I don't see, unless the population were to change, I don't see the audit price changing, whether you had one type of device or two type of device. The new electronic ballot counting devices that are being looked at do have the scanning capability, but none of the ones that we are currently looking at, they are not high-speed scanners, because we don't have big central locations where we high-speed scan all of our ballots. So they're a little bit different than the actual scanning machine that we use for our audits.
Quick follow-up, please.
Yep.
Thank you. The new machines, they do scan those images, and so doing an audit based on those images scanned, would that be less of a cost than using the high-speed scanners and be able to speed up the process even without using the high-speed scanners?
Great question. I think depending on what the rules of the audit are and how who writes them and how they're written, it could possibly be less time, and I don't think it would not be less expensive, because you would still have to pay for the software and the reading of the ballot.
Thank you.
Okay. Representative Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my call. Because I haven't looked at the website, I'd like to ask the high-speed scanner that you refer to, does it specify in the website the manufacturer, the model number, and all that kind of information? And
Thank you for the question. I believe in the report it does reference what it is. I don't know if it does the model number, but it is a Clear Ballot high-speed scanning device. Clear Ballot is the manufacturer, but I can get you that information.
Follow.
thank you. Follow up. Does it also specify the software that's used to read the votes, and the manufacturer and or whoever is the company that publishes the software?
Thank you. So Clear Ballot has their own software. It's proprietary. It's not open sourced. All of the devices that we're looking at, ballot counting devices we're looking at are proprietary software, except for one that's an open source software.
Thank you.
Okay. And the Deputy Secretary is under time constraints, so I'm going to take one last question here. Representative Burnham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Deputy Hennessy. I was wondering, when the audit is being conducted, it says in the public, is that right next to where the machines are, or is this in a different location open to the public? Will they be transferring those ballots
Good
to
question.
another
Yes.
location?
Thank you for the question. So the when noon comes around, a person from the Secretary of State's office is at the polling location to inform the moderator that they have been luckily chosen to have an audit done of their machine. And we are there until the close of polls, when they seal that box so we can see that no ballots have been commingled. The next morning, the Secretary of State's office comes and picks up those boxes or box for that machine, and the town signs them over to us on their logs. They are then transferred to the archives building, the Secretary of State's archives building, and the audits are held at the archives building. I believe that's where we'll do them in the future. It's worked out very well. It's the same place, if you've ever attended a recount, that's where we do our recounts as well, and they are definitely open to the public.
Okay, thank you, Secretary. I believe you are out of time with us, so I'm going to say thank you so much. I think we'll see you later today, maybe. Next up is Susan Paschel from Concord and Secure Democracy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm Susan Paschel from the DuPont Group in Concord, and I'm going to read a statement in support of this bill on behalf of Secure Democracy. Secure Democracy is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that works to improve election integrity and ensure all eligible citizens have the freedom to vote how they choose. From the creation and printing of the ballots to the actual programming of the voting machine, the voting process is a human process. As a result, human errors can cause mistakes in the tabulation process. A post-election audit checks that the voting equipment and procedures used to count votes function properly and that the reported election outcome was correct. Additionally, post-election audits are recommended by election security experts as a method to protect election integrity. The 2023 report issued by the New Hampshire Special Committee on Voter Confidence found that election audits increased voter confidence. Public comment from voters across the state showed that New Hampshire should have a robust audit process. This bill is a measured step to cultivating and implementing an audit process that will increase voters' trust in the New Hampshire electoral system. We see this as a practical, common sense step forward for New Hampshire's electoral system. Secure Democracy supports the bill and encourages all members of the committee to support its passage.
Okay, will you be taking questions from the committee?
I hope I'll be able to answer them.
Okay, well, we'll see if there are any. It does not appear so. You answered every question that you were asked wonderfully.
Thank you all.
Next up is Mark Lindman from Millbrook, New York, with verified voting. If you could press the button there. There you go. More. There you go.
I'm live. Okay. I have written testimony. I'll distribute it, but I won't read it now. I'm Mark Lindeman. I'm Policy and Strategy Director at Verified Voting, a national nonpartisan nonprofit that basically works at the intersection of technology and elections to make sure that technology is used appropriately for justified public confidence and outcomes. And some of you may know my name from the Windham audit. I was the town of Windham's representative to that audit team. So I've spent a lot of quality time with both state and local election officials here in New Hampshire, and I really do feel like I have skin in the game. I've also been working on routine post-election audits like the one proposed here since 2007. So I know some stuff. Some of it may be wrong, I don't know. What I want to emphasize is that tabulation audits of the type we're describing here to check the accuracy of vote tabulations ultimately always should refer back to paper ballots. They should not rely on ballot images, whether those ballot images are captured by the original voting machine, as we were discussing, yes, or captured by a secondary scanner, such as the clear ballot system we're describing in this. Why is that? Well, plain and simple, voters can verify their own ballots. Voters have no way to verify ballot images. And in fact, there is no authoritative reason to trust digital ballot images. They are hardware and software artifacts. They can be erroneous in any number of ways. Potentially, they could be subverted by malicious software, which could actually undetectably swap votes in the images. Now, I did not come here today to tell you that I think that's likely. What I'm here to tell you today is that you should take that question off the table by having the audit refer back to individual ballots. So the way I would go about doing that, the ideal way, first of all, is when the ballots are rescanned to imprint them in the margins with a serial number. And then you can authoritatively link each ballot to how the audit system interpreted that ballot. Okay, so Representative Wary, we're not really talking about a hand count here exactly. We're talking about individual points of comparison. So in the bill as it comes to you, as I understand it, the intention is individual points of comparison between the ballot images and how the audit system interpreted those. But since I don't want to refer to the ballot images, I want to go back to the ballots. I would suggest randomly sampling 100 ballots and seeing how the audit system interpreted each of those. You can use the fixed sample size no matter how many ballots are rescanned. It's the same principle as a national public opinion poll of 1,000 people having the same margin of error, whether it's a national poll, as I just said, or whether it's a poll of a mayoral contest. The margin of error really depends on the sample size, right? That's the n and the n minus 1, all that. So with that, by limiting the check on the system to 100 paper ballots, first of all, you're getting a more trustworthy check. Second, you're probably making yourself some time to scan and audit a few more machines because that sample does not have to increase. And you also have a system that is adaptable to hand counts and to other machines as they come online. I agree that this committee, this legislature, will be revisiting the audit statute, but I don't think you have to pass a statute that's kind of used once and throw away. So I have other comments. I'll distribute them, but those are my highlights, and I'm here if there are questions.
Questions from the committee? Representative Muirhead.
Just with respect, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just with respect to those other comments, you will be sending us
I have them
attachment?
here. I read the advice not to hand out the testimony because people will be reading it instead of listening. So I'm working really hard to be engaging here.
Especially Representative Muirhead's known for that. Do you have a follow-up?
I'm just to note that I'm looking forward to reading those.
I'm sure you are. Okay, thank you. Last up is Liz Ayakobuchi. Did I get that close? We need to know what town you're from, Miss Ayakobuchi. Okay, where in Massachusetts? Excellent. What town do you live in Massachusetts? Amesbury? Make sure you press that silver button in front of you. There you go.
I also have written testimony that I'll pass out afterward. Basically, I just wanted to say that we are actually sensitive to the challenges of trying to audit elections here in the Granite State. You have lots and lots of individual small jurisdictions, so it's a different environment than trying to audit in other states. But with that said, we really do want you to please include at least some paper ballots as you're auditing. You'll see in my handout that images can be hacked. And as Mark said, you don't want to introduce that uncertainty into a process that's intended to reassure people about the validity of the election results. Also, I'm going to echo the request to eliminate the current references to AccuVote and to broaden the spectrum of what's covered. Again, you don't want to throw away statute. You're already beginning to use non-AccuVote machines. I would also like to ask that you include the presidential primary in your scheme here. We've been talking with federal, we've been talking with federal election security folks, and they are actually warning us that the 2024 election is already a target of both foreign and domestic interference. And first in the nation primary, New Hampshire has a responsibility to produce trustworthy results. And so I strongly recommend that you extend this. I know it's a short turnaround time, but I strongly recommend that you audit the presidential primary. Last one is I will suggest that you increase the number of town or city wards. That's the language currently in the bill. You've got more than 300 polling places, 234 municipalities. If you're only auditing 4, that's not going to give folks very much confidence in the audit results. And I'm happy to take questions.
Questions from the committee? Representative Bay, do you have a question? No, okay.
Then I'll-
No, I think that's it. Representative Wood, can you grab that blue sheet for me? I don't have anyone else signed up, at least in pink cards. So if I'm missing you, I'm missing you. And then we are running a little bit behind, but that's okay. Because we've already had lunch, as you know. All right, thank you. Okay. There was one person signed up in support of who did not speak. And with that, I will close the public hearing on Senate Bill 158. I will immediately open up the public hearing on SB. Where is my list? I think it's 70, but I want to trust me. 157. I meant to close 157. I mean to open 158. How about that? We're opening up Senate Bill 158 immediately. We have closed 157. And Senator Gray is recognized.
Thank you. My name is James Gray. I represent Senate District 6, which starts up in Alton, Gilmanton, and goes down Route 11 into Rochester. 158, absentee ballot outer envelopes. They're not needed except to put stamps on and addresses on, and we need to get rid of them. If you go to the state of Maine, they have one envelope and they do their affidavits and they do their mailing addresses and they do all of that stuff in one. The people who have fought this particular legislation the hardest are the clerks, saying that it's going to cause them amounts of time that they don't have when it comes to election day. If the person comes in, votes, and doesn't need to put it in an outer envelope, I kind of doubt that there's a whole lot of extra time that it's going to take them to look and make sure that the affidavit is signed. That the ones that are coming in the mail, that if you mail one in, the clerks should be able to open that outer envelope and then look at the affidavits to make sure it's signed. If they were to wait until the last day before the election, whether it's you're in Florida or wherever else, there's not the ability that would have been there to cure. these same people are the ones that ask us to do all the same things that we did during COVID, when we allowed them to open the outer envelopes on Saturday, Sunday, or Monday before the election and mark up the checklist. If you're going to do it then, it should be even easier to do if there's no outer envelope involved in the first place. The outer envelope doesn't do anything. Right now, the statute says that you'll maintain it in the outer envelope until election day, and then the moderator starts the process in the absentee ballots. He opens the outer envelope, inspects them for signature, etc. Since we brought up signature, there was a court decision that precludes us in New Hampshire from comparing signatures on the application with the signature on the affidavit. But that decision had two things in it. It said that you would be able to compare the signatures if there were a way to cure, in other words, fix a mistake. They didn't sign it. They printed instead of signing. They did whatever. And the other thing that they wanted is that the people who were comparing the signature be trained. Certainly the Secretary of State's office has told me several times that they would provide the training. And the last part is the ability to cure. If they are not in the outer envelope, certainly the clerks would be able to at least look at the signatures to make sure it is signed, and make sure that it says John James instead of Jane Doe. That would be another reason that right now we could reject it if it was the wrong name. But with some of those signatures, you can't tell one squiggly line from another squiggly line, because a lot of our students aren't taught in school anymore to actually sign anything. They're taught how to make the first initial, I'm told, and then a squiggle after that kind of looks like something. But again, the purpose of this is to take away work from the clerks, to take away work from the others. Right now, like I say, that if you, for some reason, stuck your ballot in the envelope, it would not be noticed until election day, and there'd be no way for you to be notified to come back on election day. So this would do that, would give you the ability to cure. And the only other thing that's really missing from this that they had during the COVID when they were doing the ballots is that they were allowed at that point to actually highlight sections of the checklist. There's nothing in state law right now that says they couldn't highlight the checklist. The only things they would not be allowed to do, and they were not allowed to do it during COVID, is put the red AV next to their name, because that in state law says that they have already voted, and you would not be able to accept the ballot if they came in and voted in person, which they are allowed to do, especially during those first 2 hours when we say you can't process your absentee ballots until after that. But if you haven't processed it by the time somebody comes in and they decide they wanted to vote in person, that is perfectly, in fact, it's the preferred thing to do. But I'll be quiet, and hopefully we'll get on to the next bill and I can get out and back to my committee.
Can only be so lucky. Are there questions from the committee? All right. See, look at that. If you preface it with "Don't ask me questions." Next up is Natch Grays from Concord, New Hampshire, with the New Hampshire Municipal Association.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Natch Grays with the Municipal Association. We do support Senate Bill 158. It provides greater flexibility in processing absentee ballots, and we believe makes the process somewhat simpler because it eliminates the need to place absentee ballots returned to the clerk in person in the outer envelope, as well as allows pre-processing of aka opening the outer envelopes for those that are actually mailed. And this is something that our members have asked us to support, and we are supporting. Happy to take any questions the committee may have.
Questions from the committee? All right, we're trying to get caught back up. Thank you, Nate.
Thank you.
Mr. Graves, I should say, be a little more formal. Last up, Susan Paschel from Concord, New Hampshire with Secure Democracy.
Hi again, and thank you. Susan Paschel from the DuPont Group, here for Secure Democracy. I'll just read part of my written statement, so I'll even be quicker than 2 minutes. That is that to echo what Senator Gray said, this will cut down on work for clerks, because during the 2020 presidential election, 31% of total votes cast in New Hampshire were cast through an absentee ballot. Over 250,000 voters equates to a significant amount of administrative electoral work for town and city clerks, particularly in smaller localities that may only have a small staff and volunteer pool. Senate Bill 158 is a practical and fiscally responsible method to make processing absentee ballots faster and more efficient. We strongly urge you to pass this bill.
Okay, will you be taking questions?
I will try.
Okay, are there any questions from the committee? And there you go, you did it.
Thank
I
you.
don't have anyone else sign up to speak. Representative Gray, I almost called you, Gray. Woof! Representative Wood, if you could grab that blue sheet for me, that'd be great. For SB 158. Almost back on time. Thank you. All right. There were 2 people signed up in favor who did not speak. And with that, I will close the public hearing on SB 158. The committee will stand in recess for about 4 minutes until 2:30, where we will work on SCR 1. Thank you. Okay, it's 2:30. That's all the notice you get. Going to open the House election law public hearing on SCR 1. I believe Mr. Bossy is pinch hitting for Senator Birdsell. I can assure you we'd all rather have Senator Birdsell.
As would I. She's currently in the Finance Committee considering the many changes you folks have made to HB1 and HB2. And thanks you for the courtesy. Good afternoon, Chairman Barry, members of the Election Law Committee. I am Grant Bossy from the New Hampshire Senate, here to introduce SCR1, not only on behalf of Senator Regina Birdsell, the prime sponsor, but also the 23 other senators who co-sponsored this resolution. Since 1916, New Hampshire has chosen its delegates to the Republican and Democratic National Conventions through our primary. Since 1975, state law has mandated that New Hampshire's primary be held at least a week before any similar contest. The New Hampshire primary is important for several reasons, and not just for the health of our state. New Hampshire voters expect candidates to earn their votes. Grassroots campaigns force candidates to persuade voters, making them better candidates and better prepared to serve as president. Winning in New Hampshire or having a surprisingly good showing can help candidates secure their party's nomination, but a poor showing in New Hampshire can end a struggling campaign, narrowing the field for upcoming contests. The current challenge to the First in the Nation primary isn't from Delaware or Nevada or Arizona, but from Washington, D.C. While the Republican National Committee has confirmed New Hampshire's status, the Democratic National Committee wants to move other states in front of us and threatens not to seat New Hampshire delegates if we stay first in compliance with our state law. The DNC even sent you a list of demands on how we should amend our state election laws to suit them. You will decide how our elections are run and how the delegates are chosen. Senator Birdsell urges you to send a signal to Washington that we stand united in support of New Hampshire's First in the Nation primary. She thanks you for your consideration and support of SCR1. Thank you.
Okay. I assume you won't be taking questions. You're not a senator?
If you have questions, I can get them to a senator and make sure you get answers.
I have questions. No. Does anybody have anything they want to submit to the Senate to ask questions for? I didn't think so. Thank you, Mr. Bossy. It's always
Thank you
good
very
seeing you. If anybody don't know, him and I have a very good relationship, so it's we can be tongue in cheek with each other. It's okay. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to SCR1? I thought that one would have gotten a little more love on the calendar, but I guess not. Nobody wants to come up here and defend our First in the Nation primary. None of the lobbyists want to do that. Awesome. Okay. With that, I will close the hearing on SCR1, and we will reconvene in 25 minutes at 3 o'clock. Oh yeah, let's grab that blue sheet. Hey, Representative Wood, can you grab that blue sheet? I'm just collecting my binders up here, right? My clipboards, just like all the clipboards. Okay. Yes, if you could. And there were 2 people signed in favor who did not speak. All right, one last chance. You might want to get up here and defend this primary. All right, no. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing on SCR1 and see you guys at 3 o'clock. Okay, I hope everybody enjoyed the break. I'm going to open back up the House Election Law public hearings. Going to open the public hearing on SB 70. Before we recognize Senator Gray, there are quite a few people signed up to speak on this, so I am going to enforce a time limit. I think there's well over a dozen. So we are going to limit testimony to 3 minutes apiece, including Senator Gray. A previous request of the ranking member who's not here is that applies to everybody. So unfortunately, I have to apply that to you. But don't be mad at me. Be mad at the person who's not here. It's way easier to blame her. Thank you.
I'm ready. My name is James Gray. I'm a senator from District 6, which starts up in Alton, Gilmanton, goes down Route 11 to Rochester. This bill has back again. The interpretation of what was written before had a lot more computer work in there. What's envisioned is that a person will be able to go to the portal, they'll be able to request a name change, an address change, a whatever else, party affiliation change, etc. And then that information through ElectionNet or its successor will be transferred to the clerk or the supervisor of the checklist, and they will be able to assist you in accomplishing that. Certainly the vision for the future is that if you're standing there in line waiting to register, that in some distant, not even thought of yet, that you'd be able to electronically fill out the form, hit a button. When you get up there, you'd say, oh, I just sent this and it gave me this number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the person would say, yep, all I need to do is see your license and we're good to go. But we're not there yet. So we're going to start with baby steps, get the portal out there, let the people, especially all of us who are now live by our phones, be able to do some of this information. And I think I'm within the time limit, Mr. Chair.
You managed to do it. Time limit doesn't apply to questions, so anybody who wants to ask a question may ask a question. Just those that call it the opening salvo. All right, you get off that easy. Thank you, Senator Gray. I don't believe we have any more of you today, right? Are you coming back?
There is an amendment that
Yes.
I'm not really in favor of.
Okay.
That I might stay around for.
All right, you got to do what you got to do. Next up on the list is Linda Bundy from Antrim, New Hampshire.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of House Election Law. I'm Linda Bundy and I'm from Antrim. I support SB 70. An election information portal will provide voters with increased accessibility to the registration process and updating of information. Residents of rural and low socioeconomic communities, as well as individuals with medical conditions or physical disabilities, face specific challenges to registration. Being able to submit an application electronically at their own convenience mitigates those obstacles. Making it easier to register before Election Day can reduce long lines and waiting at the polls. I have worked at the past 3 elections as a ballot clerk, and I can see the benefits of the portal based on my experience. An election information portal will increase the efficiency of the work of the supervisors of the checklists. Elimination of a physical paper document will reduce errors due to handwriting, data entry, or missing information, and remove the additional step of having to spend time inputting information into the system. The local municipal clerk will still verify that the information provided is accurate and meets all requirements prior to registration. The reduction in printing, mailing, and staff time will reduce costs for the local municipality. Many members of the public who testified before the Special Committee on Voter Confidence cited the importance of modernizing our elections, and in its final report, the committee said there is a need to have updated checklist verification. An election information portal would be an important improvement in our elections that will increase accessibility and accuracy while maintaining security and integrity. Now is the right time to make the sensible step forward of establishing an election information portal. I ask that the committee vote ought to pass on SB 70. Thank you for your time.
Will you be taking questions, Ms. Bundy?
No, thanks.
Okay. Next up is Beverly Cotton from Ware, New Hampshire.
Good afternoon, Chairman Barry, committee members. Thank you so much for your time today. I too am in support of SB 70. I am very pleased to see this portal making its way through our legislature. This tool is going to allow for creation of a new voter application, requesting an absentee ballot, and updating of demographic information. The portal will also allow our voter rolls to remain current with up-to-date information and allow for less of a burden on our town clerks. I am a ballot clerk and have been for several years, and I am witness to the great deal of lines at the polls to provide updated information. This allows that to be done ahead of time, but does not sacrifice the requirement of any form of identity confirmation. So we are not compromising that integrity. Today, 40 states and Washington, D.C. use portals. They describe a significant reduction in omitted information and paper forms. New Hampshire spends $1.5 million to $4 million, depending on the election year, to process paper forms. This bill is a common sense step towards making our elections more efficient. We should be working to make voting as accessible as possible for voters to have their turn in participating in their democracy, and this moves the ball forward a bit. It's still, it's of modest cost. It's under $500,000. Nationally, it's reported between $250,000 and $600,000 is the cost to implement the portal, and we're right about in the middle of that. So we seem to be in a better place than last year's estimate. The municipal savings of a large portion of the $10 million in paper processing that we've spent since 2014 seems to be making that a very well investment. This is a significant relief to election officials. It is a significant improvement in data integrity of our voter rolls. So I would strongly urge you to support this to pass SB 70. And I have some, if you're data geeks, I have some data here for you that I will pass around. Thank you so much for your time today.
Awesome. Will you be taking questions from the committee?
I will.
Are there questions from the committee? Okay, they're right. And if you want to give what you have to Representative Wood,
Yes.
I try to avoid the pass around while we're in testimony out of respect for others, but I'm sure Representative Wood will distribute it after we're done hearing from everybody and got the Angry Birds going. All right. Let's all look at him and judge. Just quiet.
Shut it off.
Next up is going to be Louise Spencer. If you want to get on deck while Representative Bohm. Yep, sorry. There you go. Everybody give good job, Representative Bohm. I don't think you'll be winning any races on that anytime soon. All right.
I've never been invited up to speak with.
Well, if you think about it,
to music,
it's kind of like an entry music, like on WWE. You know, when the wrestlers come out, like that was for you.
Yes.
All right, we're ready to go when you are.
Sure, thank you. So my name's Louise Spencer, and I live in Concord, and I am the co-founder of the Kent Street Coalition, which is an all-volunteer grassroots advocacy organization. And I thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members, for taking my testimony today. I am here on behalf of Kent Street urging the committee to vote to pass on SB 70. This bill would have the benefits of significantly reducing mistakes in the registration process and the process to update our voting rolls, and would increase efficiency while still honoring the New Hampshire tradition, the valued tradition of having local officials be the final determinants of who's qualified to vote. I think that's a really important aspect of this. I just want to say that my husband, now retired, is a physician, and his handwriting is terrible, really awful. And in the early days, all the prescriptions were handwritten. And as electronic medical records were developed, those got transferred into an electronic format. Studies have shown that there have been up to 35-40% reduction in errors for prescriptions since the adoption of electronic medical records. So if you saw my husband's handwriting, you would understand how that is a possible statistic. So I've also attended a good number of supervisors of the checklist meetings and have seen where they've had to hold up and pass around a registration to determine, is that a J or a K, or is this name Maria or Marin? And oftentimes also having to go back into ElectionNet to update information that's already there in what is a very time-consuming process. So if people are entering their own information correctly, that will greatly reduce errors. And so is another reason why I believe that this is a very strong bill that gives us time to see, it's a step forward, as Senator Gray said, and so for that reason, I urge ought to pass.
Okay, will you be taking questions from the committee?
Sure.
Are there questions from the committee? All right, easy enough. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Next up, Sue. Oh man, Nastasi. It wasn't even close. All right, from Rollinsford, New Hampshire.
All right. Well, thank you, Chair Ross Berry, the Election Law Committee, and Senator Gray for being the prime sponsor of the bill, SB 70. As a voter learning of SB 70 and what the bill would do if it became law, my reaction is yes. What a great idea to be able to adjust a home or a domicile or a mailing address or a party affiliation, plus request an absentee ballot. A new neighbor with hours difficult to go to town hall can start the voter application online. Again, as a voter, and though retired, I always have to check what are the current town hall hours. Of course, you realize that during COVID and the ease of guidelines, hours kept changing at different town halls. But, at least parking is always easy in Rollinsford, but nearby Dover can be limited. Second, I'm one of the 3 supervisors of the checklist for Rollinsford. Love the job, the work involved, and I look at the duties to service the voters on an election day, plus keeping the town's checklist of voters accurate throughout the year as rewarding. Staying current with policies and whatever changes we are told by Tricia of the Secretary of State's office. We learn, adjust, and know it's part of the supervisor's job. Earlier in my work life, I've serviced the public, maybe in retail or a medical practice. And it's a good advantage to, be used to servicing the public, being able to speak to the public. And I also looked at it as being, it can be lapped over even to be nonpartisan. As a supervisor, I see advantage to SB 70. A new voter or a voter changing an address or changing their last name, there is flexibility and ease for the voter. Plus, for supervisors, reading penmanship has been a challenge. Time has been used to make corrections due to a spelling error, which then causes a combining of files within ElectionNet. For example, there can be a file of Jack and another file of Jock, and then learn it's the same voter. So this is like a combining, deleting files, and can be interesting. Third, as a Legal Women Voters member, I support SB 70. An election information portal supports voter registration, which supports voters casting their ballot on election day. This increases flexibility and ease for voting, and also an encouragement to vote. The League is nonpartisan, and the League educates the public on a nonpartisan basis. The more voters are informed and with knowledge that they have adjusted online their status, all the better on election day. A happy, pleased voter.
Excellent. You nailed it. Are you, we're at the end of your time. I don't want to completely cut you off. So if you have any, let's call it closing shots.
Thank you for your time.
That's an excellent one. Does anybody, will you be taking questions?
Sure.
Are there any questions from the committee? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, the other League of Women Voters, Liz Tantarelli from Newbury, New Hampshire.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak to this bill. I've been doing this, Liz Tantarelli, President of the League of Women Voters of New Hampshire. And I've been testifying in favor of this bill for the last 3 years. When Senator Gray first introduced it in his committee, I publicly stated, "You're my new BFF," to my eternal embarrassment since then. But, you know, I'm glad that I've lived long enough to be in the 21st century, and this bill brings voting rights into the 21st century. My written testimony references 2 reports, one by the Brennan Center, one by the Legal Defense Fund, that this kind of information portal will, in the long run, save money. And the ballot clerks and supervisors who have testified have indicated that already. At last count that I could find, there are only 8 states that don't do some form of online voter registration. So it's about time we joined the rest of the country. When we talk to younger people about voting, they sometimes look at me very peculiarly when I say, "You have to do this at your town clerk's office." Like, why should they do that? The rest of their lives are online. Why would they do that? And people scoff when I say, "Go to your town clerk's office," and they say they're open 8 minutes a week. Now, I realize that's an exaggeration, but it does indicate that for some voters, it's just not convenient to register that way, to go there and do a simple change of address and so on. So it is for those reasons that I strongly support this bill. It will help us in our work to empower voters, and I urge you to support it. I will take questions if there are any.
Are there any questions from the committee? You preempted me. All right, seeing none, thank you. Next up, Nate Grays from Concord, New Hampshire, with the New Hampshire Municipal Association.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nate Graves for the Municipal Association. We also support this bill. We love bills that try to make voting processes simpler and more efficient. I think the rest of my testimony would be repetitive of what you've already heard, so I'm happy to take any questions if the committee has them.
Okay, see, everybody take notes. This is how you know. Does anyone have any questions for the committee? All right, well, that was easy.
Thank you.
Next up, Susan Paschel from Concord, New Hampshire, with Secure Democracy. Going once, going twice. Oh, you're there. I'm sorry, I didn't see you sit down. I apologize. You snuck in. I was looking over here. You already made it. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Again, Susan Paschal from the DuPont Group in Concord, and we represent Secure Democracy. And we strongly support this bill. I won't repeat all the points you've heard before, but I'll just cover a few. Creating this information portal will help voters and local election administrators, as you've heard. At its core, the online information portal simply permits eligible residents to fill out and submit an application electronically. It'll improve election integrity by helping New Hampshire keep more accurate voting rolls. Being able to submit applications online would increase accuracy of the voter checklist because it becomes more convenient for a voter to update. So we see it as a practical step forward for New Hampshire's electoral system, and we hope you will vote up to pass. Thanks for your consideration.
Will you be taking questions?
No.
Okay, that's easy enough. All right, next up is Sarah Lobdell from Concord, New Hampshire, and Open Democracy.
Good afternoon. Thank you for taking my testimony. I'll hand around copies afterward. My name is Sarah Lobdell. I'm a voter and poll worker in Keene and program coordinator of Open Democracy. We're a nonpartisan nonprofit representing 36,000 voters across New Hampshire, and we are urging on to pass on SB 70. Most of what is in my testimony is already said, but I would just highlight two things. One is that this portal would make it easier for voters to register if they can't get to their clerk when it's open 8 minutes a week, such as people who work, people who might be going to school full time, people who just can't get out of their house for various reasons. So this would really be very much helpful for these voters. And second of all, as a poll worker, last election I worked the checklist addendum table, and that's where people who register same day come and you put them on the checklist. And I would say a vast majority of the folks that we saw were either simply changing an address from like one number to the next, or new voters who were younger and more likely to access and use such a portal as this. And for people simply changing an address or name, this would make it a whole lot easier. So urging ought to pass on SB 70 and happy to take any questions.
Are there questions from the committee? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up is Olivia Zink, also Judith Ackerson. Okay, from Franklin, New Hampshire, also with Open Democracy.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Olivia Zink, Executive Director of Open Democracy Action, a nonpartisan nonprofit. I live in Franklin, and I also have testimony from Judith Ackerson, who is the Ward 3 Supervisor of the Checklist in Franklin, New Hampshire. So I'll quickly cover both things. I want to thank this committee for all the work that you have done to modernize applications, the application process, voter registration forms, and it's really important that we begin to modernize elections. Last year, I had the privilege and honor to serve on the Voter Confidence Committee, and I spent 37 hours traveling around, or 37 hours of meetings traveling around the state listening to voters. And many believed that having clean checklists would increase confidence in our election process, and modernization would also create voter confidence. It's an important step in supporting local poll workers. I serve as a selectman or a city councilor in my community, and so I have a role on election day. And I just want to tell one story. A voter came to check in, and their name was not on the checklist when they handed me their ID. Lo and behold, they did register to vote, but their last name was spelled incorrectly on the checklist. Their last name, the second letter was an O instead of an A. I was lucky to flip the page and just double check, like maybe it got misspelled, because they swore they were already registered. And I think that this portal will help make these corrections so that accurate names are on a voter checklist. Judith, Ward 3 Supervisor of the Checklist, says she was elected to a system that is antiquated. We need to, the current system of paper forms creates a lot of work for supervisors of the checklist. And she has no hesitancy in modernizing. Judith wanted to point out that this is a bipartisan bill that has support from both parties, and that we need legislation with bipartisan support. And that this will continue to keep our election system safe while we modernize. Election volunteers, and especially supervisors of the checklist, give enormous hours for training, for showing up at town halls, for meetings, and at their polling places. And Judith hopes that this system can pass to make a more efficient in the duties for her supervisor of the checklist. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Questions from the committee? This is okay. All right. That's very unusual. Election law, no questions. All right. Next up, Jordan Applewhite from Sugar Hill, New Hampshire. I'm sorry I didn't get you in there earlier. I didn't realize you were at the bottom. I should have moved you forward. I'll try to do the non-lobbyists up front. I apologize. Make sure you hit that button in front of you right there.
Like that? Okay.
Absolutely.
Hello, my name is Jordan Applewhite. I'm a supervisor of the checklist in Sugar Hill, and I'm here today to testify in support of SB 70. I lived in 3 other states before making New Hampshire my home, and all 3 of those states enjoy the modern conveniences laid out in this bill. When I moved here, I was surprised to discover that registering to vote required visiting my town clerk at an office that's only open for 10 hours a week in the middle of the workday. Opponents of SB 70 may say, even if registering at the town clerk's office is inconvenient, why not just register on election day? For starters, not everyone has the privilege to take off work so they can vote. Workers with a long commute can't simply pop over to the town building on their lunch break. Also, I'm sure most other supervisors and election officials would agree that we prefer to minimize the number of same-day registrations. Not only does it create a bottleneck at our table when we receive an influx of new applicants all at once, but perfectly eligible voters often bring inadequate documentation to verify their identity or domicile. In these cases, we resort to the use of legally binding affidavits to make sure our residents are not disenfranchised. Just this session, however, we saw some in the legislature fighting to remove this affidavit system that allowed 3,500 eligible Granite Staters to vote last fall. In light of ongoing efforts to make same-day registration more difficult, it's only prudent to allow convenient options for registering and fixing problems ahead of Election Day. SB 70 is a needed step in that direction. Ultimately, there are 2 increasingly polarized points of view when it comes to election reform. One says that, despite no evidence of fraud, we must tighten and restrict our voting systems. It alleges wrongdoing among the hardworking volunteers who spend long days clerking and filing and counting to make sure our democratic exercise is possible. Myself and the other election officials of all political persuasions, who I'm proud to call my friends, we feel differently. We believe our democracy is most secure when every eligible voice is heard, when every voter feels that their contribution is honored. SB 70 might just look like a common sense modernization of a few paper forms, but it's also a show of respect and understanding to working Granite Staters. It takes nothing away from those who prefer to register and vote in person, but for some, SB 70 will make the difference between whether they're able to vote at all. Thanks very much.
Will you be taking questions?
No, thanks.
All right, that's fine. Next up is Matt Mushian from Claremont, New Hampshire, and I'm sure I just butchered your name. I apologize. Oh, nailed it.
Nailed it. Thank you very much. I will also keep it short because much of my testimony you've already heard. But my name's Matt Mushian. I live in Claremont, where I serve as a city councilor. And today I'm here representing 603 Forward, a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to educating, activating, and empowering young people in New Hampshire. And we support Senate Bill 70 for the reasons you've heard today, because we believe that by allowing voters to easily and safely access an online election information portal for their voting needs, folks will be more likely to register before Election Day, and it'll in turn help reduce lines or potential confusion at the polls, which, as you heard, will help Granite State voters and our hardworking election officials. And ultimately, by providing voters with accessible and up-to-date information about the voting process, it'll make it easier for young, working-age people in New Hampshire to exercise their right to vote. So we urge you to vote ought to pass on this bill, and I would take any questions you have.
All right. Are there questions from the committee? They are quiet. All right. Last up is Kelsey Duville from Lincoln, Massachusetts, and America Votes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Kelsey Duville. I am from Lincoln, Massachusetts, but it's a point of pride to say that I was born and raised in Auburn, New Hampshire, and I'm a newly minted Massachusetts resident. So I am the election official program manager with the New Hampshire Campaign for Voting Rights, which is a nonpartisan coalition of organizations working in support of voting rights and a healthy democracy, and is a project of America Votes New Hampshire. I'm here today in support of SB 70. Establishing an election information portal would benefit both our election officials, as we've heard a lot about today, and voters by allowing voters to complete a new voter application, request an absentee ballot, or make updates to their registration quickly and easily online. Many people are already comfortable handling their banking, their bill payments, and car registrations online in a safe and secure way, and it's a common sense decision to give voters that same option for their voter registration. With the ease of completing a voter application or updating their info through a portal, we can also reduce the number of voters registering for the first time on Election Day, which can lead to long lines at many polling places, especially during presidential elections. Voters would also be able to immediately update their address upon moving, helping to keep the voter rolls updated and accurate, something we know can increase voter confidence. An election information portal will also support our supervisors of the checklist, cutting back on the amount of data entry and difficulty of reading handwriting, again, reducing potential errors. With this legislation, voter registration applications will go to local election officials to be processed, meaning they still have oversight and are at the heart of the registration process. We've been very glad to hear that the Secretary of State mentioned an updated ElectionNet system would be compatible with the potential election information portal. With 42 states and Washington, D.C. utilizing online systems, now is the time for New Hampshire to utilize this upgrade and create an election information portal that works with our elections. I thank you for your time. I will say our campaign director, Mackenzie St. Germain, is out of town and is usually here testifying. So if you have questions, I would urge you to direct them to her, and I will not be taking questions.
Awesome. Would anyone else like to speak to this bill, SB 70? Representative Wood, can you grab me that blue sheet? So how, see, when you set the limit, though, everybody's like, you go fast. Okay. There was one person signed in, not speaking, and they were signed up in favor. With that, I'm going to close the public hearing on SB 70, and I'm going to open the public hearing on my own non-germane amendment and hand the invisible gavel over to the vice chairman and realize I did not pass out my amendment, so I'm going to do the thing that I hate the most, which is distribute paperwork in the middle of my own testimony. And then I'm going to go sit up front. Okay. All right. Like that. And a note to the vice chair, when we are over with this, please do not close the public hearing entirely. I just have one more announcement I have to make. So don't just close it up and gavel us out. The invisible gavel. All right. There you go. That should be everybody. All right. Should I give myself a time limit?
So a hearing for amendment to SB 70, and I recognize Representative Ross Berry for his input.
Thank you, fellow committee members. I'm here to introduce House Amendment 2023-1280H, which is an amendment to SB 70. It does two things. It deals with the bill we just heard, about the election portal, and it takes the bill regarding the HAVA money. I forget which bill it was, but the bill that where we would fund half of the machine purchases with the HAVA money. It takes that bill and attaches it to the bottom of HB 70, and then changes one thing about HB 70, which is right now SB 70, excuse me, SB 70 draws, I believe, from the general fund. This would change the funding mechanism for SB 70 to the HAVA funds. So a couple of reasons why I did that. So when we were hearing the information about the machine bill, I'd never seen the HAVA money table before. I think you guys probably all remember that HAVA money table. And I looked at the HAVA money table, and I understood the Secretary of State's concerns with not drawing those funds down. I didn't express those concerns at the time, especially from the chair, because that would be inappropriate. But the way the money is being managed, the argument of protecting the fund is kind of moot with me. The money is already not being protected in that if the state was acting as a proper fiduciary on the HAVA money, they would be taking the interest earned, backfilling it into the principal to offset inflation, and then spending whatever was left, right? So in a regular year, we'd see 3% inflation, right? If they got a 7% return on the money, they'd take the 3%, they'd shove it back in, and they'd spend the 4%, which is not nothing. 4% of $12 million, that interest would end up being several hundreds of thousands of dollars that we could spend on effectively anything related to helping people vote, and it would continue to grow. So it would have its same value, modern day value going forward. The state's not doing that. They're not getting that. I'm kind of like baffled how the state's not getting that. Just for reference, over the last 30 years, the S&P 500 has averaged a 9.88% interest rate return on investment. So the fact that I think we're getting like less than 6 or something, and then spending it, so we're not investing it back into the principal. We're just spending the money. So every year, while we're spending the same amount of money in principal, we're actually spending less because inflation. It's not a political statement about inflation. Inflation exists every single year, regardless of who's in the White House, regardless of who controls Congress. It averages about 3% a year. So once I kind of looked at that and realized, all right, the argument about protecting this fund is moot because you're already not protecting this fund. It then said, all right, well, how can we actually get what we want? So we know that our colleagues on the other side of the wall really love the portal. We probably want the HAVA money being spent on the machines. And I said, well, here's a great opportunity to marry the two and we can have our cake and eat it too. So that's what the bill does. I'm happy to answer any questions. We've already heard testimony on both bills. I ruled my own amendment non-germane, just so nobody could say that I didn't. But I actually probably could have just administered this because we've already had a hearing on the bill that it is based off of. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm sure I've missed something in my testimony, but I'm happy to answer any questions. And I'm sure there'll probably maybe be some. Who knows?
Any questions from the committee? Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for taking my question. This committee has heard a bill that talks about what you have in your amendment, which was HB 447, I believe.
Correct.
And I'm pretty sure this committee retained that bill.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if, as chair, you might consider, creating a subcommittee to bring that bill back and look at the details in that bill, as opposed to applying this amendment to a bill that is largely unrelated.
Yeah. So the Senate's already killed the HAVA money for the machines. They already did it. So if you want a position to negotiate, you have to bring something to the table, if you catch my drift. So we can form all the subcommittees we want. When you go to the table, you got to get something.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
For now. Thank you.
I will say, and this was actually an announcement I was going to make at the end of it. Ranking Member Lane and I co-signed a letter to the Ballot Law Commission. I'm happy to make copies of the letters available to the Ballot Law Commission, basically saying, like, hurry it up. So if they do hurry it up, we need this now and not next year.
Any further questions?
Yeah, I do. Thank
Representative
you.
Brennan. Follow up.
Thank you. Given that the Senate has already killed the HAVA funds bill, if this committee were to adopt this amendment to SB 70, would it not make it more difficult to pass the election portal bill overall?
Yep. So historically, this body has killed the portal bill. So this is, you get something you want and we get something we want. Historically, we obviously have not voted on the portal bill. We won't until later. But historically, it has gone down because it's $1 million website. By the way, another reason I want to go into the HAVA money is I get the distinct feeling that if the Secretary of State is controlling it with HAVA money, that it won't be $1 million website. If you weren't, for those of you who were around last year, it was a $4 million website last year. So the price has come down 75% in a year, which is impressive. But I somehow get the feeling that if there's a little more oversight and not an open warrant, that it won't be $1 million boondoggle, and you won't have to hear that word from me anymore. It'll be a more reasonable, maybe $30,000 boondoggle, which is probably what it should actually cost, but neither here nor there. $1 million website's insane.
May I ask another follow-up? I don't have the amendment in front of me, so I can't look at the details of what you have in the amendment. But from what I gather, there's a grant program in the amendment. Is that what you're proposing, a grant program for municipalities to receive HAVA funds for election ballot
Correct.
counting machines?
Correct. It's that program. Yeah. It's the HAVA program money bill. I forget the number. I can't remember bill numbers. I can't remember when they're in front of me. But it's the HAVA bill money, the HAVA money bill that we heard shoved onto the back of SB 70 and then changing the funding mechanism for SB 70.
And
Which, by the way, SB 70 probably should be funded with HAVA money anyways. Just in general, it should be funded with HAVA money. It's literally about helping people vote.
in your amendment, does this allow for municipalities to purchase the ballot counting machines that all municipalities to purchase the ballot counting machines they would need to run their elections efficiently with new machines?
Correct. It's the language is identical. It didn't change a word of the machine part of the language. It went right on. I told OLS, take it verbatim, put it in, and change the funding mechanism for the whole bill, which included SB 70, to HAVA money. So one small change to SB 70, and then something that I think that the House probably wants tacked on the end of it.
I will hold back for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
All right. I'm going to go hang out in the other room.
Senator Gray. I have my mic on.
Thank you. My name is James Gray. I represent Senate District 6, which starts up in Gilmanton, Alton, down Route 11 to Rochester. I oppose the amendment. Certainly, the Senate has taken a position on using HAVA funds for this. A lot of people don't know that I'm also a city councilman in Rochester. And certainly I'm not speaking for the city council of Rochester, but for myself, that if you're going to give me money, don't give me it with strings attached to it. Give me the cash and I'll decide whether I need to fix potholes or whether I need additional funds for the school, whether I need to buy voting machines or poll books or other devices. Certainly the reason that you still have HAVA funds is that the section in law that is being modified and requires that right now that we retain a certain amount of that HAVA money. I think it's 12 times the annual cost for this purpose. And the money that we got in 2002, I believe it was, we have received additional money throughout the years so that they have been able to maintain that 12 times the annual cost. What is it spent for now? It's spent for the training. It's spent for upgrades in the system that we use for accessible voting. Many of you, if you're as old as I am, we've actually had 3 accessible voting machines or revisions to the accessible voting machines in the last 20 years, which is significant because we have included more and more and more voters in the ability to vote at the polls on a regular ballot now, a ballot that goes into the counting devices. It is a fallacy to think that if we take the money and spend the HAVA money on something else, because all of that money that you're doing now would then have to come out of the general fund. So, we don't create money, we don't destroy money, we tax people. So to think that, if I say, well, I'm going to go spend this money on these devices, that it's going to save the people, it's just going to come out of a different pocket. Why, don't I want to spend the money on the voting machines? Well, I don't want a community out there that says, well, gee, I just bought new voting machines 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and now because I don't like them or the new machines are out there and gee, it does this and that'll be so much better. Hey, if you want to go buy new machines, buy new machines. Spend your money, okay? Spend your tax dollars, the ones that you collected through property tax or whatever. But, leave the general fund alone. Let the general fund, when the Secretary of State presented his budget and it was at 2:00 to the Senate Finance Committee, I was unfortunately over here instead of chairing that committee at the time. But they are going to come and they are going to say, I no longer have the HAVA money if we're going to do these pre-election trainings like we do every year. And if I'm going to do the election manual, which they do every 2 years, if I am going to do all of these other things, including the accessible voting machines, that it's either got to come out of HAVA funds, which it does now because the funds are there and haven't been touched, or it's got to come out of general funds. So, I would rather it be the way the system is right now. I would rather the communities, if they want to use a voting machine or a poll book, they're certainly able to. Rochester decided to use poll books and does fund that. And I'm sure that the money that we've set aside for replacing the voting machines, as soon as there's one approved that they believe is going to be the useful one, that we will go out and do that. So I'll let the communities decide whether they're going to count by hand, count by, machine, use poll books, not use poll books. Let them make that decision, and they would fund their own on that decision. I'd be glad to take any questions.
Any question? Representative Howard first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Gray, for taking my question. How many municipalities have purchased new machines over the past decade?
If you understand the history of the AccuVote machines, there haven't been any new machines really purchased. LHS, along with some of the other companies, have actually gone out to other communities that have had the AccuVote machine, or there is a similar machine that has a lot of replacement parts that are used in the AccuVotes, and those are the parts that are out there that they're using to maintain the machines. They include rollers, they include the motors in there, even the read heads and different things. The guts of the machine, though, the counting devices, the chips that are in there are all dictated by the Ballot Law Commission. So except for some new old stock or old new stock, I forget which way I'm supposed to say that, there were some machines that they were able to purchase from other communities. but most likely they were not AccuVote machines. They were the sister machine that contained those repair parts that have been serving the citizens in New Hampshire very well.
Follow up. Thank you. So I guess to rephrase it, how much money have these municipalities spent over the past decade on their election processes?
The communities, including Rochester, have a contract, and I believe that the state is part of that contract with LHS to maintain the machines and to have them ready. The communities also can have the machines serviced. One of the things about the Wyndham machines is that the Wyndham machine that came from the school district hadn't been serviced in a number of years and contained a lot of paper residue that was built up in the machine, which was a concern for the auditors because of that. But you'd have to go to each individual community, and because there's ballot counting in there, that could also skew your number.
Thank you.
Representative Brennan?
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. This committee heard testimony from the Secretary of State's office that the HAVA funds balance is in at least $12.9 million and that purchasing new ballot counting machines would be estimated to be around $3 million if every municipality were to request a new machine as opposed to hand counting, which they may do, can still continue to do when those new machines are online. Would it be your testimony that the municipalities should foot the bill for the new machines, even with the excess of HAVA funds that are available to municipalities through a grant program that would save taxpayers dollars?
Well, part of the reason that you do this machine, this is, if you look in the crossed out sections in here of what the current HAVA money is supposed to do, one of the things it's supposed to do is maintain the system that we use. Well, part of that system is the ElectionNet software. Right now, the Secretary of State is in negotiation with a company to replace the ElectionNet software with something more modern. And I think that if you take that amount of money and say, I'm going to use that for HAVA money, I'm going to update the portal, from HAVA money, I'm going to use these machines from HAVA money, I'm going to use the poll books, and I'm going to take that out of HAVA money. Very quickly, that $12 million that you talked about is gone. So, again, you're making a choice for now, or you're making a choice for later. The past legislatures have decided that we would rather have the Secretary of State have that money to be able to do these different trainings and upgrades for software, etc. As I mentioned earlier, that we've had actually 3 different accessible voting machines in the last 20 years that have been available. The last one, the one we have now, will actually print on a regular ballot and therefore will be able to be read by the AccuVote machines. The one immediately prior to that had to be hand counted because you used a blank sheet of paper to put into the machine and get the ballot out. So again, it's choices. But if you are short on any of that money and you've depleted the HAVA money, then the Secretary of State is going to have to come back through either fiscal or through other means and ask for money to be transferred into or out of various accounts. I would just assume, from what I know, being the Vice Chair Fiscal and the Chair of Senate Finance, I would rather have the money available to them through the HAVA funds on hand so that he has it and ready to spend to best help the citizens of New Hampshire to be able to vote.
Follow up, please.
Follow up.
Thank you. It's my understanding that with a grant program, as this amendment outlines, that the Secretary of State would have to approve the grant funds to municipalities, which would provide the Secretary of State with management of these funds to make sure that the HAVA funds are not depleted. Am I misunderstanding this, or do you have a similar understanding of this?
Well, you haven't defined in this amendment, you know, all of the things that are going to come out of there, how people qualify for these grants, how much, you know, how long it would be between one grant and the next grant. And you've also got testimony of the author of the amendment that he wants to make a change to Senate Bill 70 so that the portal funds would be paid for out of the HAVA money. Again, you know, if the more you change this, okay, and make it include things that the Senate has already voted on other issues, the less chance it has. And, you know, just as you've got the ability to put this language, you know, into Senate Bill 70, I've got the option of putting Senate Bill 70 on all kinds of things that the House would like to get done. And, you know, playing tit for tat just doesn't suit me well, but, you know, I do know how to play.
Thank you.
Representative Burnham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Gray, for taking my question. I was just wondering, do you know how much is spent from the HAVA funds every year?
No, because the Secretary of State, as you look at the crossed out part of this bill, says that he needs to keep 12 times the annual maintenance costs that he does in there. And that would get audited through, you know, the departments and presented to fiscal, but I haven't been on fiscal long enough that his department audit has come forward. So
Okay,
I have not looked.
Thank you.
Anybody else questions? Because I have one. Now, one of the things we've heard in our testimony on other things is that the AccuVote machines, the company that makes them is no longer servicing them. They are not making parts. You mentioned other places you can get parts, but not through AccuVote. And that's one of the reasons the Secretary of State is looking at other machines. Now, if that's true, which I believe it is, why then are we going to force towns to spend money on machines that they may only have spent 5 years ago? Some maybe 20 years ago, but some maybe just recently have bought an extra machine, and which they already paid for. Now they're going to have to pay more money because the machines have changed when we have the HAVA money?
The way I understand the contract with LHS is that they are guaranteeing that the machines will be available through the 2024 election cycle. I don't know of any community other than, you know, buying used machines from somewhere that has actually spent any, you know, new money on machines. It has been service of the machines that are out there. Certainly, if you look back in history, the state of New Hampshire has not bought any of those machines. If the community wants to do a machine count, then they have the ability to do it, and they have the they would have the responsibility of buying that machine. That if I'm not forcing them to do it. I'm not forcing them not to do it. Certainly, I believe that there are machines out there that we will find satisfactory, and that in the next year and a half, I guess it's a little more than a year and a half, because it's the machines would have to be ready for election. The town elections in 2025 would be the time, and if it were not ready, many of these towns are not the large towns that would be needing to do this, and by other towns not needing as many machines, it would also leave more machines to be able to be used for the larger towns. Now, part of this, when we talk about the servicing of the machines, remember that the card that goes in those machines also has to be programmed. And the current software that's available for that is, I think it's Windows 95, which hasn't been serviced for a long time. That has advantages and disadvantages. Nobody's writing hacks to go into those machines anymore because nobody has them. Okay, and the machines that we have that are doing that are not connected to the internet. So there's good and bad about it being. And if you want to see that, you can go into the Wyndham audit where they talked about part of the reason that our elections are secure as they are is because the equipment is as old as it is, and that there's not a lot of people out there that would bother doing anything with it.
Okay, not seeing any more questions. Thank you. Now I'd like to call Michael O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Michael O'Brien. I put a support and oppose on the card. I come up here confused for the second time today. Really just torn for the second time today. America Votes supports both these bills individually and have supported both the portal today and the use of HAVA funds before. We would love a deal to be reached where both of these things could move forward. I will say the Secretary of State's position from when they spoke here earlier to now seems to have softened a little bit in front of House Finance. They mentioned that they would be willing to use a certain portion of money to help towns with the machines. Also in a Globe article, the Secretary of State was quoted as saying, "We know these machines are on their last legs," so they're a little more forthright and hope to have machines approved before 2024 if towns or cities want to use them. And so knowing the timeline and that it is coming up, again, it is, I think, a good thing and would be good for the state to allow for purchases to help at least help with some of the purchase of the machines so that towns aren't stuck using machines that may or may not work. However, again, we don't want to lose both by trying to combine them together. So if there's a deal can be reached, I would certainly encourage that and love to see that, but also recognize that if that can't happen, don't want to lose both bills in an effort that might not go there. So that's basically testimony, and happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. Now our last speaker is Nate Graves, and then his association.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It appears there's a lot more legislative negotiating here than I recognized at first. We do support this amendment. Nate Grace for the Municipal Association. Sorry if I didn't say that. As identified by the committee, this is identical to House Bill 447. We testified in support of that bill. As Mr. O'Brien noted, the Secretary of State's office has spoken about the need to replace the AccuVote machines several times since we heard that bill in this committee. And I'd also just like to add for the committee's information that if you haven't read the Concord Monitor, a few days ago, David Brooks reported that the three different machines, three different types of machines were used in three different town meetings during the March town meetings, all handled the ballots correctly. There are two more that are being tested in the May town meetings. So I anticipate that we should expect the Ballot Law Commission to be able to make some kind of judgment about what, if any, of those machines should be certified, and we could be on the path to getting these very old machines, the AccuVote machines, replaced. And that's really our focus, is try to have a smooth replacement, smooth rollout with as minimal cost as possible to the local taxpayers. I'm happy to take any questions that
the committee may have.
Any questions? Hearing none.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you guys miss me? Representative Wood, can we grab the blue sheet? Just so the committee knows, I'm probably going to schedule the votes for everything that we did today next Tuesday in the morning. I have not come to that final decision. You'll obviously know when I schedule it, but that is my current, let's call it inclination. So you know, I am chair of two committees. Oh, by the way, nobody signed in to support or against this, and I'm closing the public hearing on the amendment 2023-1280H. Sorry about that. So everybody knows, I'm doing that because I have the child care committee, so I'm trying to front load election law and backload child care just to keep my life a little easier. I announced during my testimony that Ranking Member Lane and I co-signed a letter to the Ballot Law Commission. I'm happy to provide anyone copies with that who would like to see it. And with that, I will probably see you next week. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to close our public hearing. Thanks. Bye.